Welcome to Connection Artist, the podcast for building better relationships by design. Love and human connection are fundamental needs for all of us, but how do we cultivate lasting, emotionally healthy, fulfilling relationships with ourselves and others? I'm Anna Luca, and I invite you to join me in meeting everyday people with diverse backgrounds and ages who all have one thing in common: a genuine passion for fostering meaningful connections. You'll hear their heartwarming stories and practical advice for building lasting marriages, lifelong friendships, and self-love. In this season 1, we sit down with 10 couples, learn how they met, and hear the secrets behind how they've built lasting marriages. Their insights will inspire and enlighten you. I also interview guests who found and maintained warm, lasting friendships for decades, and they're sharing how they did it. And lastly, we can't forget the importance of growing a loving relationship with ourselves, so we discuss building self-love and confidence. I've brought together a fantastic lineup of guests for you to meet who will share their unique stories and invaluable communication and relationship advice. Together, we're learning the secrets to building more meaningful, fulfilling relationships, one conversation at a time. I'm Anna Luca, and I invite you to join me in becoming a connection artist. All right, everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we have Suzie and Joe. Suzie and Joe have been married for a while. I was introduced to Suzie by a mutual friend. She's a sister of a mutual friend, and we briefly met, but I'm going to let them tell their story, who they are, and how long they've been together, and how long they've been married.
Well, we met in high school, actually, so it was about 52 years ago. We met. We then got married 46 years ago. So, although we dated for 5 years, but broke up and then got back together in our dating world. And so we've been married now 46 years in September.
Oh, wow. Suzie was just doing the math. All right. Well,
no, you are correct.
47.
We've been married 46
Yes.
years. It will be 47.
It will be 47
in September.
Wow, that's so impressive. So when you first met in high school, that's obviously like such a goal for people. Like, the claim that we are high school sweethearts. In your dating history, did you consider, hey, maybe I want to explore what else is out there? How did you know that she was the one for you and he was the one for you?
He was a year older, and so he graduated. We were in a class together, and so then he graduated from high school, and I was going to still be in high school for a year. And then that summer, he called and asked me out, and we had known each other from class. Mm-hmm. And so we just did kind of start dating. We did date my whole senior year, and then I went away to college, and so we still were dating, but, it was like you say, is something else interesting or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so we did. He dated a few other people, and I did, but nothing long-term or anything. And so then it appeared that we would prefer each other. And I don't know, if it was like a what, but obviously the other people weren't as interesting or seem as compatible.
What about you, Joe? What was your experience like dating in those college years?
Well, it was awesome. It was really great to get a break from her. No, I would just say that I think we knew early on. I mean, it wasn't like bells went off or anything, but we kind of really grew into a very solid relationship as we were in our 20 years old. Mm-hmm. And then it was just a matter of time before we decided to get married. And the wonderful thing for both of us, I think we did have good role models. We both came from non-divorced parents. My father died when he was very young, and I was young. I was 10 years old when my dad died. We had a big family. Suzie has a big family. But I think we emulated the fact that through thick and thin, I mean, we've certainly had our ups and downs over the years. Had many different challenges, starting a business, having children, having grandchildren. But through it all, I just think that we just have had that kind of deep-rooted love for each other that we'll make it through. Let's just, the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Yeah. So many great questions just came to mind there with what you shared. One of them being compatibility. When you guys were dating other people, but you came back to each other, what compatibility factors were key for you guys in deciding this is my person here?
I would say that it's almost hard to remember, but I would say just kind of the feeling that you got being around the other him other than someone else. I mean, a sense of humor and just the way that we would just talk to each other and that sort of thing, and that you would say what you wanted. And whereas you weren't like, should I, say or whatever. So I would guess kind of for me it would be something like that.
So for you, it was kind of like the freedom to be yourself,
right.
to express yourself
right.
authentically, and to be accepted and not
yes.
judged, and to just be your natural self
right.
around someone. Okay,
yep.
Great. What about you,
yeah.
Joe?
Well, I've always had the opinion that quality time comes out of quantity time. So we do spend a lot of time together. We do many things together. My male friends marvel at how much Suzie and I do things together. And she's always been exceptionally supportive. I started an insurance agency from scratch. We were starving to death when we first got married. I had 3 kids in 1 bedroom of a quad home townhouse. But through that, I think one thing that has stood out from day one is our ability to communicate. We could talk your ear off if you let us. But I mean, just with each other, we get up every morning at 5 o'clock and have coffee and sit in the dark in our 4-season porch, and it's just easy. It's easy to communicate with each other.
Great. Again, so many questions in my mind are popping up. But one question that I've had is, you guys went through some really transformational years, like your 20s, or you're getting to learn and explore about yourself and the world still. Even your 30s, you're kind of settling into your career. During these transitional phases of your lives, how did you guys grow together along the same path? Because it can be so common for people to kind of start off together but then realize they want to grow in different directions, just because they naturally are, maybe they realize what they thought they wanted isn't what they wanted. They learn more about themselves, more about whatever it might be. How did you guys, was it a challenge for you guys to grow along the same parallel lines together, or did you actively have to manage that and intentionally grow together throughout your relationship?
Once again, that's hard to kind of remember, but I would say that I think it was like just we saw the light at the end of the tunnel of what we both wanted, and then we just both worked toward that, and just we're doing it this and we're doing it that, and then it's like sometimes, well, let's do this, and I think it was just we'd just throw our different ideas in and see which one we thought seemed the better. Mm-hmm. And it was usually his that was the better one. and so anyway, but then that we both saw what we wanted at the end, and we just kept moving toward that.
So you guys had a shared mutual goal in the relationship, maybe for your family, for your career. Was that accurate? Or in what categories did you guys share your mutual goals?
It was probably more like his career, getting his business and stuff going. I did have some jobs. We actually tried working together, and that's one thing we discovered that is something that we do not do.
Also, wallpapering.
We don't
and,
wallpaper.
We don't
hang curtains together.
teach each other how to drive a stick shift. Those are 3 things.
So you guys learned each other's kind of like trigger points in a way. These are
Well,
small triggers in some ways, but just ways to
I
let each
think
other be themselves.
It's even that I'm more, well, actually, we both are both more kind of bullheaded. And so, like, hanging the wallpaper, no, it's this way, no, it's this way, and it's this, so we're both right, and we're both wrong. And so there's just certain things we don't do well together, and we know that, and so we don't do it.
But as far as your shared goals, were they your shared goals for we both want to stay together, so this is what we need to do?
Right.
Or
Right.
like shared goals on family planning, I'm sure?
Yep.
Very much that.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think we're advocates of the traditional family, that dad's the breadwinner and mom stays at home with the kids, but that's what our life
That's
was.
what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked for us. All of our children, with the exception, I should say, 2 out of 3 of our children, both spouses are working and they're raising kids and there's daycare and all of that. One of our oldest daughter also kind of has that same business model for her marriage, in that she stays home with the kids. They're not in daycare and she's raising them. So, but I would say a big priority even to this day in our life is the family. And so just spending time with our kids, we took them on all the trips. I would win us 1 or 2 or 3 sales incentive trips every year, and we would always bring the kids. And so now in our old age, we are spending a lot of time with the kids still. They actually like to be around us. I think of my youth, and I did not, if I was a senior in high school, I would have dropped dead of embarrassment to be somewhere with my mother in a social situation, kind of. I love my mother, but it just, myself, my peers, nobody hung out with their parents. And now it seems like the kids want to do that. They want to travel with us. They want to go to happy hour with us or whatever. It's not a holy day of obligation for them to
So
do
you've
that.
maintained close relationships with your children throughout your life, as well as yourselves. It seems like connection is a true priority for you.
Yes.
Connection and family values. And then going back to, speaking of family, going back to your individual families, you mentioned, Joe, a little bit about your parents, and your dad passed away at 10, but I'd like to learn more about what the dynamics were and parental role models were that you had. So could you just, Joe, can you tell a little bit about what that relationship dynamic was like in your household in your first 10 years between your mom and your dad?
Well, it was the Leave It to Beaver household, in that my dad was in charge and my mom loved it that way. She didn't like being thrust into making heavy decisions. She and my father would work out decisions, like on we built a cabin in Wisconsin, and they would work very much together on everything. They were staunch Catholics growing up. I think Susie's folks were also Catholic, and so
6 kids.
6 kids here, 5 girls here, 4 girls and 2 boys on my family. And then through most of our lives, although in our old age it's getting a little more rocky because of the COVID kind of dividing the country. So if you're on one side of the political fence versus the other side, sometimes that can be a challenge. But for most of my February 1st will be 70 years. I've been very close with my family, and also I've been very close with Susie's family, and vice versa.
And so your parents, would you say that it was a loving bond that they had? Was it more of a was there much conflict in the household? What was the emotional dynamic of the household when you were growing up?
I would say, without a doubt, my mother and father loved each other. My father got sick in the final 2 years of his life, and they had a hard time diagnosing what the problem was. After the fact, we found out it was a tumor on his adrenal gland, but that affected all kinds of things, and so he died the day after Christmas from a heart attack at age 45. But I would just say that there wasn't, they certainly would have arguments and so on, but just no more than a normal loving couple would have differences of opinion, that kind of a thing. So it was very solid. All of us kids, after my dad died, all of us had college educations. Most of us got college degrees. So my mother was, even though she was very much wanting to be Ed McMahon and not Johnny Carson in The Tonight Show, she liked the role of being supportive and being second in charge. But she took over with vigor and just held us all accountable, and we all had jobs growing up. We all went to school. We're all responsible, and I think I can speak for my siblings that they've all been successful raising their own families too.
Okay, great. And then Suzie, do you want to share a little bit about your parental dynamics, what that household, the emotional dynamics were of that early household that you grew up in?
Once again, which was a lot of times back then, where my mother was a stay-at-home mom and my dad worked. They got married when they were younger, and then they had 5 kids, and I would say that he traveled a lot, so he was gone quite a bit, and in the earlier years, and she would be there just with all of us, and so she was very and all my sisters, I'm very close with all my sisters. They're probably my best friends, and there's he always was, we're all kind of sassy, or what would you say?
Bossy?
No, not bossy. But we all have a mind of our own, and I do think we all got that from my mother, but she had to do that because she had 5 kids and he was gone and that sort of thing. And so they were married until they both died, and they were happy. They, loved doing stuff together, and but I think that that kind of then formed us to be who we were, and so I think it's the same sort of thing. And like you said, it's what he saw and it's what I saw, and then that's what we wanted.
Yeah, from research and studies that I've read in the past, there seems to be a correlation between how successful your own relationships are in life based on the relationship role models that you had early on, especially your first 5 years. Usually those observations that you're making as a child are parental relationships or caregiver relationships. What's the dynamic between them? So it's interesting that this supports that you guys both had parental households which modeled effective collaborative marriages. At least partially thanks to that, you've been able to have a long-lasting relationship and marriage yourself.
Well, and now there's 5 of us girls, and all 5 of us were married. 2 of them have divorced, though, and so but the other 3 of us did not.
Yeah, and I'm sure it depends too on who you pick.
Yep.
I mean, it also depends too on even it's not the be all end all what your parental household is, but in some cases they may have just picked people who maybe didn't have role models that were great, or maybe weren't equipped with the kind of skills that are needed to hold a relationship, and all sorts of things could be at play. But at least it sets you at a good start. If you do have that, it gives you a little added boost. But for individuals who might be listening who maybe didn't have that growing up, didn't have a parental household that modeled great relationships, what advice would you give them as far as ways to manage your relationship and grow and build the relationship together and make sure that it's a positive relationship for both of you guys?
I would say it's very important to want the same things. And so if you're going to start a relationship with somebody, find out what you want, and hopefully you want the same things. Whether you do want children or you don't want children, or where are you thinking you'd like to live in Minnesota your whole life, or do we want to go to Florida, or do we want to, just different things like that? Because sometimes that comes up and that's a surprise to somebody. I didn't realize that's what you were thinking. And so that can happen a lot. And so I think it's just real important to get it out in the beginning, kind of exactly what it is you do want. And then just kind of keep working toward it. And it isn't easy. We've had a lot of fights and that sort of thing. And if people say they haven't, they're lying.
Yeah.
Because that's impossible. And and so there's nothing wrong with that, though. I think that's good, because then it kind of gets some ideas and everything out. So don't be afraid of that either. But I think the main thing I would think is that you have to know what you're seeing at the end of life.
So it sounds like you advise people to be clear on who they are and what they want and what their goals are.
Right.
Going into a relationship.
Yeah. And like you say, that changes.
Yeah.
And so then say, hey, I'm not thinking that anymore. I'm kind of now thinking I'd like this. What do you think about that?
Yeah. How about you, Joe? What are some of the factors that you would recommend people to consider in building a relationship that lasts?
One of my best friends, priest, when he got married, said the greatest love you can give your children is the love you give each other. And so I think if you fundamentally decide, you're good at what you like to do. So, and likewise, I think a marriage is, if you're in love with each other and feed your mind positive thoughts about your spouse and so on, it's just kind of an easy thing to do. I feel like my life's a whole lot easier married to Suzie than it would be if I was on my own. I don't know how I would have been successful in the insurance business without her help and her support and her. She was the Rock of Gibraltar in terms of the wind beneath my wings kind of a thing. And so, but then that love spawns off to children. It goes to friends, to you just realize that as you get older, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. If you don't have relationships, as you were discussing earlier with us before the podcast, relationships are tantamount to being happy and well-adjusted, and people that can support you. And Susie's other sister, the one that doesn't live here, just her husband died on Christmas Day just a few weeks ago, and we had the funeral. But all of her other sisters have been so supportive and circled the wagons around her. And so that
You need that.
network of love and family, love is fundamental.
So I want to get back to a point that you mentioned, Suzie, about conflict resolution. Because you brought up a good point. Some couples think or expect, some people in dating, they just want someone to be easy. They just want it to feel easy. And if it's not, then they're like, well, no, it must not be for me. Go back to the drawing board. Let's find someone new. But it takes work. Would you say that a great relationship takes work?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, it definitely does. And like you say, there's definitely, you're going to argue, and sometimes you get your win and sometimes they get their win. And so you've got to, kind of go back and forth and see which is the better. But yeah, definitely it is. We've had a number of arguments and stuff throughout our life.
So how do you manage those arguments and come out on the other end of them still a strong couple? Do you go into arguments with a certain mind frame or a certain approach, or can you let us into what that looks like for you guys?
Well, I would say sort of like you say, getting into the is pretty much snap. You're in this argument, and then sometimes it does take a few days and this and that, and you're kind of mad and you're not discussing maybe as much as you should and that sort of thing. But then I don't know. We've always done it. It's just kind of.
Hopefully, I think for both of us, the arguments aren't as, like when we did disagree, dating and when we disagreed early on in our marriage, they were more volatile, more deep and severe. They're not that way. You also can kind of pick up on, this is not going to end well. Perhaps we should start talking about something else, or get it out in a much calmer. If you can agree to disagree, if you can speak without raising your voice, if you can speak without cursing and swearing, both of us are capable of sounding like longshoremen when pushed, but then life is better. And if you say, I just don't think this battle is worth it, I think I'm going to back off. And
So I'm going to tie that into what you said earlier about optimism and viewing Suzie with a positive light. So it sounds like as long as even in those moments of conflict, you maintain positive regard and respect and calm in engaging with your partner, it usually has a better result and you can get through those bumps a little easier. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And sometimes venting to, you don't want to show your whole underwear drawer, so to speak, but venting to friends or family sometimes can help because they can keep you on a level that you're not going off half-cocked about something.
Okay, so you get external perspectives sometimes.
Precisely. And then you also realize that as we have had, my best lifelong friend died in July of 2023. Our brother-in-law just died, as I mentioned, and then a very close friend. We're going to the funeral
Next week.
48 hours, isn't it?
No, next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
But he died. You realize that life is very short. As I told you, I grew up just a mile over here. And about 9 people that grew up on that block. Everybody's family had 5, 6, 7 kids. Mm-hmm. And about 9 of them have died, all my age. So we're just not going to be on planet Earth that long. It's just not worth it, it's like, let's just drop it. Let's get along.
Yeah. So you kind of keep your arguments in perspective, like in the grand scheme of things, does this really matter? If not, let's let it go. We'll agree to disagree kind of a thing.
Right.
Okay.
One of the things that you said to Suzie, you were saying, now, have there been any real crises?
I was just going to ask that next, has there been any significant event in your relationship that really tested you, and how did you guys come out of that together?
Suze.
Well, yes, because I did, when you had said that, and I told him, I mean, that's an easy answer for us, is we have 3 kids, a girl and then a boy and then another girl. And our youngest girl, when she was just under 3, 2.5, she got leukemia.
Oh.
And so that was very frightening, very, and with the other 2 kids, so then one of us would be at the hospital, we'd be home with the kids, and we wanted to try to keep all of that together and not have them suffer for that. She lived, she's still alive. But some people that we met down there did not make it. There meaning? At the hospital, excuse me, at the hospital.
Children's.
Yeah, and they just going through something like that is very hard and difficult. And once again, I think part of it was we had each other. We wanted to do that. We also wanted to keep the kids not having to suffer. And once again, we had family. The family on both sides were very helpful.
How did you guys support each other during that process?
Well, I think I would say that he gave me the freedom to be down there, to care for her. We'd spend the nights and that sort of thing. And then he would, be there. And I think it's that, what would you say?
When we were both growing up, leukemia was a death sentence. You were dead. You got leukemia, you died. That's when and the magnificent German doctors developed what they call the BFM, the Berlin Frankfurt,
Munchen.
Munster. They developed a regimen that saved the children that had the most common kind of leukemia. So they don't know if they're going to have a normal life expectancy. They do realize that these people get a higher incidence of future cancers. Mm-hmm. But our little girl had just had a baby boy last year, and he's as cute as a button, and they're doing very well. They live right over here in St. Louis Park, and so it's just worked out magnificently. But we got a code blue in this 2-year regimen called on us where we were in an intensive care. She was hanging on by a thread. I drove down there. I thought I was going to pass out. I was so upset. And Suzie was down there, thankfully, but she got through that. And that test of death or about to lose somebody you love can pull you apart, but it can also really draw you together. And I think the net effect is it drew us all together. I do worry sometimes, too, as does Suzie, about the effect it had on our 2 older children, where they were, like, we are dealing with Gretchen's illness right now, and like, you can't have a hissy fit, you can't do anything as a child would, because you have to toe the line because your sister's so ill.
How did that time frame that you guys were going through all of this, juggling, being a parent, being present parents for your other 2 kids, as well as being present for each other, plus being present for your sick child, how did that test just your relationship dynamic? Like, was it more stressful were you guys closer together than ever, or did you have more conflicts because you were under so much stress, or what was that? How did that?
I almost think we were closer than, and we didn't have as many because you couldn't, because all this other was going on, that whatever it was probably wasn't worth what this was.
That's true.
And so I think that it was that, and like I say, we were trying so hard to keep it, like we would, just so that they weren't lost in it. We did like medicine races or whatever, with, she would be taking the medicine and then they would be taking, something to keep them all part of it, and so I think that we, and like I say, it would be interesting to know some of the other people that we did know down there that they did end up divorcing. What was it that it was for them that,
So some people that you knew with kids that were going through leukemia, they ended up divorcing in that process.
Right.
And you guys came together as a unit and were, I'm sure, almost like laser focused on this one outcome that you had to take care of your family, keep your family together, keep everyone alive and healthy. So you guys, again, this is where your shared goals came in.
Right.
And I remembered what I was going to ask you before regarding sharing your experiences in your relationship with friends for outside perspectives. I can imagine how that could have good and bad influences in your relationship. Sometimes when you share with your friends, they might be biased toward your view. They don't have the other person's story, so they might give misguided advice. In other cases, it can be helpful because they can help you see sides of the issue that maybe you didn't consider. And also there's the added complication of wanting to also respect your partner's privacy when you do talk to other people, so that you're not infringing on, their confidentiality and things that they might not want roaming around in your friendship circle. So how did you balance sharing and getting perspectives from others, but also being respectful to your wife and being considerate of, is this useful information or is it misguided, or how did that look? And how did you decide who to share your information with?
When you start looking at problems in marriages or relationships, lots of times the 2 subjects that come up are sex and money. So if you're having problems with sex or money, that is a common cause or the reason for the demise. But you bring up a good point. If you are sharing this information with others, that in many ways somebody once said, 90% of the world doesn't care about your problems. 10% are glad you have them. And so I think that sharing sometimes will come back and bite you in the rear end, so to speak, because you shared really personal So I tended not to get into, and still to this day, don't get into very deep conversations about finances or sex. Spouse, I mean, my friends and I, of course, how can you not be not interested in that? But just in terms of our relationship, we didn't share that much. Gretchen's illness was an easy one to kind of talk about because, it's as you say. My oldest daughter, who has 2 children, said my whole goal here, both of her children are under 5, is to keep these kids alive to age 5. I mean, obviously beyond age 5, but I mean, that's what you're in charge of, mom and dad, to keep the child alive. And so that was easy to kind of pour your guts out about how you're going with because even if they published it in the local newspaper, this, I feel like it's almost public information. So I don't think I've sometimes maybe expressed some frustration I've had with Suzie about something, but generally I would not go into any huge, deep conversation with a friend or relative for the facts that I've mentioned, that say sometimes they'll use it against you or bring it up or say something to your spouse that is not going to enhance your relationship. Sometimes it's just not a good idea. Okay. Maybe some people have found help with professional help because they're required by law to keep it private.
Yeah, so like a couples therapist.
Yeah, but we have never taken advantage of that.
Okay, so you've never gone to couples therapy.
No.
And so it sounds like, just kind of recap what you just advised. If you're going to share about your relationship with others, trusted friends, know that there are some topics that you don't share about. For you both, it was sex and finances. That is kind of off the table. You don't really talk about that with your friends.
Just surfacey. You might have had a few beers and made a comment one way or the other, but it's not like being very graphic or in-depth about it.
Yeah. And
I do share the finances with my children because we're getting older, and so if something happened, if we end up spending whatever is in the estate and they don't get much, so be it. I'm not overly concerned about that, but it's probably going to be there, and so I kind of want them to know if one or both of us die, here's where the stuff is.
Within the family, it makes sense to share more intimate details, but I understand the interest in keeping some of that. I'm sure out of respect for your partner and the health of your relationship, you don't necessarily need people's advice in the categories of sex and finance. Even if you might be curious, sometimes it's best to let that curiosity go and not compare and contrast those types of things with your friends.
Right.
Your relationship is its own unique situation. Not everyone needs to know your very personal details. But how did you determine which people were good people to open up to and which ones were maybe friends you should not be discussing private things with or sharing details with?
We have a friend that we have said it's telephone, telegraph, or tell so-and-so, this friend of ours. That's because we know
he chats.
He'll chatter and jabber. Whatever you said will be out there for the world to know. You might as well publish it in the local newspaper. So it's just kind of a live and learn. But if something came back to you that I said about you, you would be, and if it wasn't nice or it was hurtful, you'd be hurt. And also, if it was something you shared with me and then I shared with someone else when you told me not to do that, it's just not going to get you anywhere.
So be mindful if you have some friends in your circle who tend to gossip or tend to share very personal details about others. that might not be the best person to confide in, especially when it comes to your sensitive relationship experiences or needing advice. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that pretty much wraps up all the questions that I had for you. Are there any remaining last pieces of advice that you would have for someone if they're considering getting married or are currently growing their marriage? Any words of lasting impact that you'd like them to keep in mind after this podcast?
Well, I think I've got to go back to what you said earlier. It's like your selection of your mate is a big deal. So, it's just kind of the, how is his or her relationship with their mom and dad? How is their relationship with their brothers and sisters? Do they have friends and so on? If they haven't talked to anybody that they graduated from high school with for 30 years, is it them or is it the 30-year classmates? So it's just kind of stuff like that that's kind of obvious. But our divorced friend who's been through 2 marriages says choices. It's all about choices. So if you are selective, you're going to have a higher probability of success. Not to say that they may run off the bartender, you don't know, but that's going to help a lot.
So have standards when selecting your person. Don't settle.
Yeah.
And I do want to mention too, because we have talked on the topic of the importance of having or coming from a great household as a child. I do believe also, this is my personal opinion, that even if you don't, as long as you've done work on yourself to learn and educate yourself and hear from couples like you who are successful in maintaining a long-lasting relationship, and you've just done a lot of personal and self-development, I do believe that there's still hope for all those people to have healthy relationships. I think of Oprah, for example. She came from a not great upbringing.
Right.
She is one of the most successful connectors in the world, and she's had a long-lasting relationship. So, again, this is just to give hope to those who maybe didn't have great role models growing up. You can still have wonderful relationships in your life. It's never too late to improve yourself and improve the types and quality of relationships that you build. It's just about education, which is what this podcast is about, is just educating people on how to build healthy relationships. Suzie, any last words that you have to someone who might be considering marriage or trying to grow their marriage relationship? Any words of success that you pass
I
along?
had seen something recently that was just kind of funny, and now, of course, I don't remember what it was, but it was along that idea, like would you rather, if you see yourself, and especially like if you're angry or whatever, do you see yourself happier with them or without them? And then really look at that and see how in the long term or whatever, how do I see that?
So maintaining a long-term vision in my happiest self, my happiest life, is this person adding value to it, or are they taking away from it?
Right.
So keeping that vision in mind for yourself and your personal mental health and wellness. Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you guys both for sharing your backgrounds. I'm sure this is going to be really beneficial to a lot of people. I think people will be inspired by the advice that you gave them, and maybe some of them have even taken some notes. But I really appreciate you guys both opening up about your relationship and being so generous and offering advice to all of us.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. As we wrap up another episode of Connection Artist, I want to express my gratitude to you for listening and exploring how we can all grow and better connect with one another. I created this podcast to support your relationship success and happiness. If you found value in this episode, here's how you can support me and help spread the word about this podcast. First, subscribe to this podcast and share it with 10 friends. If you share this education with 10 people and they share it with 10 people and so on, we can grow this movement of creating a more loving and caring world. If you'd like to show your support on a personal level, visit www.analuca.com. That's ANALUCA. Explore my heart-centric products and education From poetry books to online courses, art prints to apparel, every purchase directly enables me to continue producing episodes and sharing these valuable stories and insights with you because this podcast is not free to create. Please consider buying something I've made with my heart and soul to connect with you. Discover handmade heart-shaped art prints and hoodies featuring my exclusive Crypto Love Drops collection at www.artbyanaluka.com. Read about the inspiration behind these beautiful heart artworks at cryptolovedrops.com. These make really great, unique gifts for your friends, family, and spouse, and serve as a lasting symbolic reminder of your love for them. Or if you enjoy journaling or you'd like to start, get my 15-minute daily guided journal for confident mindset titled Yes, I Can. If you want more stories, buy my poetry book, The People We Meet, available on Amazon or directly on my website, artbyanaluka.com. Just click on the Books tab. Listen to my music album called Reprise on Spotify. Fun fact, the opening music track that you heard on this podcast is actually composed by me and is featured in my music album. If you want to learn how to strengthen your self-worth, get my digital ebook called Well Valued, which features a 30-day blueprint for building self-worth. Or if you're single and want to learn how to assess and find your most compatible dating partner using AI, get my digital course called Well Matched. These products are all designed to strengthen your self-worth and relationships and are all linked in my website, www.analuka.com. Also, don't forget to check out my hand-illustrated apparel line at www.laughs2self.com. I hand-designed really funny, cute illustrations that made me laugh, but also serve the purpose of spreading humor, love, and connection with others. That apparel line of hoodies, t-shirts, and sweaters are exclusively available only on my website, so if you want to wear something unique, check out laughs2self.com. Connect with me on social media for podcast and life updates. You can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at AnaLukaOfficial. And lastly, if you're based in the United States and would like to be interviewed on the podcast, send me a message at myconnectionartist@gmail.com to potentially join me as a guest on this show in the future. Remember to subscribe to this podcast and leave a 5-star review. It helps a lot in reaching more listeners like you who can benefit from this information. Thank you for being a part of this Connection Artist community. I'm wishing you so much love and happiness in your relationships. Stay tuned for the next episode.